So I have one very important question left for all three of you, and that is, why do you believe what you're doing is important to the well-being of Islam, of Orthodox Judaism, Catholicism, and Christianity? And what is the danger of continuing to exclude women from leadership positions? Hello. Let's go back in reverse order. We'll start with Amina.
The work that I have dedicated myself to for nearly 40 years actually has to do with correcting the historical absence of women's voice in interpreting the sacred text, the Quran. There's no restriction. In fact, the Prophet ordered women and men to study, and women did, in fact, memorize the text from the time of its revelation to the present. But there was a shift in women's participation in what I call the establishment of the major principles, paradigms, and canon of what it means to be Muslim. And women got relegated to a rather back seat. And so when you look back on the historical record, which is copious because Islam is a very literate tradition, when you look back on the record, you don't have a single indication of women's responses to the sacred text until the 20th century. None. No restriction, but still the record is not there. So when I began to work on exegesis or Quranic analysis from a woman's perspective, from which I wrote my first book, which they're going to have me do some book signing later on, hint, hint. When I began to work on it, I still had to try to emphasize that this was not some type of a plot to dishonor women. Nevertheless, if we continue to allow that absence to go into the future, that we were not fulfilling our full agency before God. So advocating the necessity for the inclusion of women's voices and women's experiences, so that in the public space we are aware that what it means to be human is not just to be a male human, and that we aspire to the good in a person no matter what the gender, that we aspire to that good, and it doesn't matter if it's in a male form or a female form. And that has been a very hard battle to wage, because when you come into the public space and you talk about things like giving birth to children, they want to relegate that once again to the private space. And I say that it's also something that characterizes what it means to live and surrender to God. So I'm making that point by both my activist work and also by my scholarship. And the nice thing is that after 20, 30 years, there's a whole cadre of people who are now coming down, and they are accepting, even in the most conservative communities, that it is necessary to always include the woman's voice.
Before we go on, Amina, could you tell us the name of your book and when the book signing is, just so we know?
My first book is called Quran and Woman, Rereading the Sacred Text from a Woman's Perspective. And the second book is called Inside the Gender Jihad, Reform in Islam. And they're going to be over there in that corner by the Mission House, right after this.
Okay. So again, why do you believe what you're doing is important to the well-being of your religion, and what will happen if your religion, any religion, continues to exclude women?
Well, foundational to our faiths is the idea that men and women are created in the image of God. And it is the church's job to convey that message. And if the church proclaims that message from the pulpit, but at the same time, in the Roman Catholic system, for example, does not allow women to come anywhere near the altar, or to preach the gospel, or to give last rites, or to baptize people, or to marry people, it mocks the foundational message that it seeks to proclaim. And when it does that, it has a profound effect on society, because the men and women that are attending church are receiving that message. They're receiving the message that women can be excluded, that women can be not listened to, that women can go unnamed, that women can be left out of decisions. These are the messages that people receive week after week after week as acceptable, appropriate, and as the right thing to do. And so what happens to that message? Well, then that message goes into the boardroom of corporations. That message goes into our economic policies. It goes into our social security policies. It goes into our decisions about which countries we help, whether we're concerned about it's a woman and her child in Somalia, or whether we're more concerned about the oil in Iraq. It goes into everything that we're doing in the world. The church has a huge impact. I see that impact in the decisions that we're making as a society. And so it's essential that we take a look at this discrimination that's present in our systems and realize that it's not just about who you're listening to on your Sabbath day, but what happens the rest of the week after that with that message that you've internalized.
I don't think that having women in spiritual leadership is only helpful or good for the Orthodox community. I think it's good for the community at large. My students are the Orthodox voice at interfaith dialogue, at interdenominational dialogue. And the truth is there's no such thing as pluralism if one part of the population is not invited to sit at the table. And so I think that the goal is to take from women who are passionate about serving and enhancing and building the community and allowing them to serve. And really that's all that we and they, my students, are hoping to do. And it's been my experience that facts on the ground show that once a community has been shown or seen a woman in the position of spiritual leadership at the helm of their community, they're opened up to the possibility to see and understand all that women and female spiritual leaders in general can bring to the table.